If I had to bet, chances are you're not doing refinement enough.
4 hours. Can you imagine developers like carving out 4 hours a week? They would die inside a little bit.
Backlog grooming. I hear this occasionally. I know we call it backlog refinement in the Scrum Guide, but the point basically we'd like to talk about today is around some tips for effective backlog refinement or backlog grooming. Ultimately, taking a backlog that's unclear and making it clear enough that we can actually get some work done and we know what we're doing. With that said, Jason, I mean, what any thoughts on what tips you would have for effective backlog refinement?
Yeah, this is my most generic tip if I know nothing about a Scrum team. If I had to bet, chances are you're not doing refinement enough. I mean, it's just been a general pattern throughout my career that most teams aren't spending enough time in refinement. And I noticed this not by measuring hours, but if I'm at your sprint planning and nobody knows the point of these items that we're potentially working on this coming sprint, that just tells me we haven't done enough refinement. So I think getting it on the calendar, maybe 2 meetings a week or something like that, just to have a place for it to go. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
I'm curious how long you think a refinement session should be, and I know that's a subjective question, but like,
Yeah.
any guidance on that? Because I'm with you. I think frequency is a big deal. If it's not on the calendar,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen, or you're going to really make people mad when they don't do it. But how do you even begin to know how long, how much time do you block
I,
off?
that's a great question. I think you got to experiment and adjust. So pick something to get started and just see if it's too little or too small. I mean, I know that's really simplistic, but like I've been on teams where Tuesdays and Thursdays for 1 hour at 9 a.m. we have a refinement meeting scheduled. And if we look at our product backlog and it needs some more refinement, we use it. And if we look at our product backlog and it's like, we've got 2 to 3 sprints worth of work refined and ready to go, we don't need a refinement meeting today. Okay, skip it. Everybody can just keep working. That's worked well for me, but that may not work for your team. Like, but that's a good place to start.
Yeah, the old Scrum guide before 2020's revision basically said something like refinement should take no more than 10% of the Scrum
Yeah,
team's time. And, that's 10% of what? 10% of a 40-hour week, 10% of whatever.
right.
But if let's say you went on that assumption, a roughly no more than 10% of a work week, no more than say 4 hours a week.
Yeah.
So with that said, carve it up. Don't take more than that. But zero obviously is going to get you into some trouble. So I'd start there. No more than 10%.
Which begs the question, all right, so we're scheduling this. Who do we bring in for this? Because it's product backlog refinement. Product owners probably got to be there. Do we invite developers? Do we invite stakeholders? Do we invite neither and just give the product owner some time to refine it on their own? What do you guys think?
We got to caution against just having a template for here's all the people that need to be at refinement all the time. For
Yeah.
the point that you're making, the frequency in which we do it, like 4 hours. Can you imagine developers like carving out 4 hours a week? They would die inside a little bit
Not all at
to
once
go to a
anyway.
refinement. Yeah, well, that's right. Um, and maybe this is tandem with like who should be involved based on what we're talking about. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the question I might bring into play is what are we talking about? That might inform who you involve. Bigger ideas, maybe, yeah, something like that. Bring an agenda. Have
Yeah.
an advance notice as the purpose of the refinement, and then invite the appropriate people who can contribute. Not just get all people there wondering why the heck am I here? I don't like
Yeah.
refinement.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes about intentionality. A fantastic product owner that I used to work with, we would have this refinement on the schedule. And every once in a while, she would come to the team and say, "Hey, I'm going to cancel backlog refinement because I haven't prepped enough yet for it." Right? So think about that. That means she is not only
I
scheduling
like
time
that.
to prep and come up with like these are the 6 items I want to refine in our next meeting, but she had some homework to do to like start the acceptance criteria or
I like
add
that.
clarity or whatever it is. And she felt that if she didn't have time to do that prep, that it was a waste of the rest of our time to even meet. And I really respected that. So that's a tip that I give all the time. Like, don't just show up to a meeting with a blank product backlog. I have no idea what you want to refine, no idea what questions we're answering. Like, do some prep work. Have these are the items, these are the questions we're answering, these are the acceptance criteria we're building, or whatever. And then you can make effective use of people's time. And then you
That's
can
cool.
invite some stakeholders. Then do I just need the developers?
Hmm.
Maybe I need the stakeholder who requested this in the first place. That spirals into a lot of things that make the refinement more effective.
Yeah, I just kind of want to, I guess, wrap a bow around this topic in terms of like who should attend, right? Who's involved, the people doing the work, right?
Mm.
And also the experts that happen to have the knowledge that those people doing the work need to leverage, stakeholders, product owner, whatever. I mean, that'd be my point. But how many times do you think we need to go over a product backlog item before we have enough information to get that thing done?
Like,
Ooh,
doesn't that
this
that
is
question?
go ahead, Greg.
No, I was gonna say, like, that's a good question. How many times you go over something might be like, what's the ultimate end goal of refinement? What do we hope to get
Mm.
out of it? Like, if the product backlog items are what we're refining, we hit it how many times before we feel like we have something that's ready to actually be worked on? Maybe that's the. I mean, I'm kind of taking your question and pivoting it and putting a little more meat to it, but
Yeah.
um,
But Jason's favorite consultant's answer is it depends. Uh,
hate that answer.
but no, but seriously, it really does, because you can imagine a scenario where we're at sprint review and a stakeholder suggests something based on what they're seeing at sprint review, and the product owner says, "Oh my gosh, you're totally right. That's the most important thing we should do next. It's going to the very top of the product backlog." And guess what? After retro later, we've got sprint planning. We don't have a whole lot of time to refine it. We can't refine this multiple times in the next 6 weeks. It's the top thing in the product backlog. It's going to get all refined from initial idea to refined and ready to go in one discussion. On the other hand, you might have something in your product backlog for months. And if that's the case, I think it's really a good idea to refine it in small bursts. You don't have to take it from vague to actionable in one discussion. You can start a discussion when it's 3 months out, add some detail, come back to it when it's 2 months out, add a little more detail, come back to it when it's a month or so away. Try to get it to actionable and completely ready. It might be 3 to 5 times, and really anything in between might happen depending on how volatile your product backlog is.
What do you think the level of specificity is that we would need to get these things to be clear?
I think. Oh, I have something I played with. Is this an obvious thing that we need to do? Let me give an
Mm.
example. We're working on a handful of teams. Once in a while, you'll catch something on, say like a website, for instance, just using a really generic example people can identify with. And you go to the about page, but it is not clear what the about page is about, which is kind of ironic, right? So there's a request to change the title of the page to about our team. Pretty obvious what needs to be done there. Go, edit it, save it, be done, right? We could have a template for this. We could have a 3-hour discussion. We could go through 6 systems and processes to get it done, or you can just go do the work. I would say that's an obvious task. Might even be able to be tagged as simple. It's obvious. So refinement might not really require hardly any refinement. It's more of a go do. But there's other things that are more complex that have a few more unknowns. And I think in refinement, we can ask that basic question. Is this obvious or is this more complex? And then you might have people be able to say, here's what you're not thinking about in that request. Or if it's a goal that we hope to work towards, there's complexity or unknowns. So I think it has a factor to do with unknowns and obvious things. And I think teams work back and forth between those a lot, which we have to at least account for that.
Yeah. I have sort of a what I think is a strange way to look at the level of specificity. I think it should be just slightly less specificity than the team is completely comfortable with. So imagine a team that's used to getting these super duper detailed requirements documents. It tells them exactly what they need to build and exactly, down to the nth degree. And now they're using Scrum, where there's a lot, sometimes less certainty and more generating these acceptance criteria on the fly. I probably wouldn't start that kind of team out with just a title and a basic description and very few details. Like that's going to be too much. They're not going to know how to proceed, right? But if you're a team that's used to using Scrum and you're generating acceptance criteria, and maybe you get into what I think is a bad habit of putting the solution steps into the refinement, maybe we start taking them away a little bit and say, instead of talking about how we're going to do this thing, we're just going to stick to the bounds of what has to be true, and the options that we have on how to get there, we're going to leave that into sprint time when we're actually doing the work. And that might feel a little uncomfortable, but that also might unlock some creativity and take some of the bounds off of our thinking. So I think if the team is like, yes, this has the perfect level of specificity, I know exactly how to solve it, then that tells me we can probably experiment with getting just a little bit less specific and a little bit more open in our refinement.